This episode is brought to you by the Wholesome Fertility Method online program. This program includes video courses on understanding Chinese medicine patterns and how this reflects on cycle charting. It also includes foods shown to benefit fertility health, which products to avoid, supplements and herbs that are shown to improve sperm and egg quality, acupressure points, and essential oil recipes to optimize fertility health, mindfulness, breathing exercises, and much, much more. I'm providing a second round of spots, which include live coaching calls with the program for a limited time. To find out more, visit www.thewholesomefertilitymethod.com. Episode number 41 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Zahra Haji. Zahra is the yoga goddess. She created the first online fertility yoga and meditation program, which is practiced by women in over 25 countries. The moon goddess cycle-harmonizing, fertility-enhancing practice has helped over 50% of her clients conceive. Zahra is also a registered psychotherapist and women's reproductive health and fertility coach, helping women address the often left out psychological and emotional aspects of fertility challenges. So welcome to the podcast, Zahra.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you.
So you have had quite an amazing journey to how you founded Yoga Goddess. Can you share your story with the listeners?
Sure. It's kind of a crazy story. It started actually a long time ago in 2003 when I was invited to meet a yogi who did yoga and numerology. And I had kind of gone to see him because a friend of mine who worked in television at the time in a news station was invited. And I thought, oh, it would be kind of cool. I've never heard of yoga and numerology. And so I, had been taking yoga at that time, just sort of after work at the gym kind of thing. And I asked the yogi, I've been thinking about doing yoga teacher training. What do you think? And he said, Zahra, you're in a yoga school and you're speaking to a yogi and you're asking me if you should do yoga teacher training. He's like, what do you think I'm going to say? And I was like, okay, well, that's fair. And so it was really, on gut instinct and a sense of like right place, right time that I decided to make that plunge. And it was kind of, it was definitely a life-changing moment. I always laughed. I didn't want to be that person that said yoga changed my life, that cliche, but I ended up definitely becoming that person.
If it's true,
yeah,
it's
true. So, in 2005, I finished my yoga teacher training, and the whole thing started because he said to me, you are a teacher. And I said, no, I work in marketing. And he's like, no, I'm telling you that you are a teacher. And so it was a strange thing to discover about myself when that was not the path that I was on. So I always say, I didn't choose this path, it chose me. And then when I decided to go back to do further training in women's studies in 2006. And that's when I first discovered a huge body of knowledge that explains our cyclical connection to the moon through our menstrual cycle. And I was really astounded because, at that point I was in my early 30s and had been, a menstruating person for, I guess, over half my life or about half my life at that time. And I always just found my period as a source of stress and, kind of like a pain, literally and figuratively. And I didn't see anything beneficial about it until I came across this idea that actually women are cyclical beings and our bodies follow a rhythm akin to the seasons and the phases of the moon. And we are not linear like men, but that we follow this pattern that helps us to understand ourselves, that there's a part of the month where we're very outward and energetic, and like the spring and summer, there's this burgeoning energy, and then there's this full blossom. And then half the month, we are like fall and winter, where the leaves fall off the trees and we sort of start to get
Mm-hmm.
quieter
Right.
and we go inward and we retreat, and we're not psycho, which is, how the idea of women's cyclical nature is often painted.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, we're not psycho, we're cyclical, period. And that was,
Right.
kind of a mantra of
Absolutely.
mine.
Yes.
And I decided, I should teach this. So that was my kind of like that graduating workshop out of that program. And everyone was like, yeah, I can't believe, never heard of this. And women need to know about this. And so I started teaching my program, Moon Goddess, at the time. It was a yoga and meditation program specifically designed for women to understand their cyclical nature and to work with the four goddess energies that manifest through the four phases of the cycle. So through the follicular phase, from the beginning of the egg starting to develop to the point where ovulation happens, to when the egg either becomes fertilized or doesn't become fertilized, and then declines and disintegrates in the shedding of the lining. That actually each of those phases are connected to an archetypal feminine, or what I like to call goddess energy. And so the archetypal feminine, the feminine archetypes that, if you're familiar with these traditions, it's the maiden, the mother, the enchantress, and the crone. And so I decided
Mm-hmm.
to update that a little bit so that it's more current to the go-getter, the nurturer, the enchantress, and the wise woman.
Ooh, I like that.
And so we actually cycle through each of these energies every week, approximately, of the month of our cycle. And what I found is when I started teaching this, it was really intriguing for a lot of women. But the women who are most attracted to this information were either women who are struggling with, like painful periods or really difficult PMS, like raging, raging hormones, or
Mm-hmm.
they were struggling with infertility. And so what I found was more and more women were coming to my classes because they were trying to conceive, and maybe they were trying to also heal an underlying condition like endometriosis, or polyps or cysts, or I think like those kinds of like PCOS, like those kinds of manifestations of um, menstrual health problems that are indicators of further hormonal imbalance, and then infertility often comes from that. And then there's other women who just were struggling with unexplained infertility. And then,
Mm-hmm.
those women were having really, miraculous results, even when they had tried
Wow.
IVF, or even though they had tried to conceive for like 3 years and nothing was happening. So I believe this reconnection to your womb, to the source of the divine feminine power inside of you, and to the reorientation around your experience of your menstrual cycle as not something that's a pain or something that's inconvenient or
Mm-hmm.
something that's a curse or something that you hate. But having that reorientation around, wow, actually, I experience these four goddess energies. And if I actually
Mm-hmm.
harness these energies, I can actually use them to better improve my sex life, how I show up at work, my relationships with my friends, with my family, with my partner, because I get that there's certain kind of like powers available to me at different parts of my cycle. And
Mm-hmm.
when I capitalize on my like optimizing those times, then I actually get to show up as the best version of me and get the most out of my life because I'm capitalizing on the skills and the opportunities that are, highlighted at that time of my cycle. So it's really empowering. And then this, that was my intention in teaching this work. And then, what ended up happening is it was really working to heal hormonal imbalance and especially infertility, which sort of ended up, then my program ended up morphing into a fertility yoga program, and it's the first of its kind ever to be brought online. So like women in 25 countries, over 25 countries actually are, actively practicing moon goddess and actively getting pregnant. Mm,
Fantastic. So it's really intriguing to look at it, and I'm sure it's very enlightening for a lot of people to learn and to observe once they learned it or
right.
to know what to look for. So how do you implement
Right.
this
Yeah.
in
So,
practice?
just to kind of backtrack a tiny bit in terms of yoga, because I haven't really spoken so much about yoga and how that connects to fertility. So essentially, the kind of yoga that I teach is a Kundalini yoga practice, and the reason
Mhm.
that I work with Kundalini yoga is twofold. One is it actually targets the practice that I use targets the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is the master gland of the endocrine system and is essentially
Mhm.
responsible for sending the message to the brain to produce hormones that are related to fertility. So we hear about FSH,
Right.
AMH, LH, like all the luteinizing hormones, the follicle stimulating hormones, the hormones that indicate to the body it's time to ovulate, the hormones that indicate to the body it's time to menstruate. So estrogen and progesterone. So all those hormones need to be triggered through the communication. There's an axis, the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. So in order for optimal functioning of your reproductive and endocrine system, that pituitary ovarian hypothalamus axis needs to be working optimally. And so the yoga program, the Kundalini practice, is very specifically about regaining, communication, let's say, with the pituitary gland, optimizing its functioning so that it can do the best job within that communication circuit
Right.
that's required, right? So that's, the practical reason. And then there's very much a spiritual, energetic, um, I guess, womb reason, in the sense of there's a term in yoga called Mata Shakti. And Mata Shakti means the mother energy of creation.
Love that.
And yeah. And so Mata meaning mother and Shakti meaning um, like the mother goddess energy. Like it's kind of hard to translate. But it's that spark of life, that spark of the, igniting of life. And that happens in the womb. And so many women are really disconnected from their relationship with their wombs.
Yeah.
Either because they've had, really bad experiences with their periods. Maybe there is sexual trauma or abuse. Maybe painful periods. There's all kinds of reasons why we would have a disconnected or unhappy relationship with our womb.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when you're on the fertility journey, like, isn't that the place where you actually want to reconcile your relationship?
Right.
So the another reason why I chose, and the practice is a combination of hatha and kundalini, um, which I'll get to in a moment. But the point, like, to even understand what kundalini means, is that there's this energy that lays dormant at the base of your spine that you want to awaken. And so that energy is Mata Shakti.
Right.
And so the idea being that we need to wake up our connection to the divine feminine and be reconnected to our womb power, because isn't it like the world is created through the womb? Every human being was birthed from a womb.
Right.
Right? So we want to feel not like our wombs are a source of disappointment and failure,
Yeah.
and our periods are a source of just, grief. Rather, we really want to redefine this relationship and reorient ourselves to have a much more empowered and loving, and like a sense of like, yeah, this is who I am as a woman.
Yeah.
And really owning that. And so the Kundalini practice is a really powerful, energetic way of doing that healing work without necessarily going through years of therapy or, having somebody outside of yourself heal you. That's another reason why I find that the yoga practice is so powerful, because it puts the power back in a woman's hands. And a lot of times in the fertility journey, it feels so disempowering. You go to the clinic, you
Yes.
go for blood work, you go for ultrasounds. It feels really invasive. Your
Mm-hmm.
husband becomes really a source of semen, and the whole thing becomes really mechanical. And like, all you're trying to do is make this conception thing happen. And sometimes, to the point where we're having it happen outside the body, which I have no issues at all with, because it's a miracle that we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it can feel really disempowering to both people involved in the process, that here's
Yeah.
something that's supposed to happen in the bedroom, really easily, and you spend most of your life trying to make it not happen.
Right.
And nobody teaches you that actually you can only get pregnant in a 24-hour window once a month, until
Mm-hmm.
now, when you're trying to get pregnant.
Right.
Right? And
Exactly.
all the information you've learned up until now is, you realize, complete nonsense. And so we have no relationship with our fertility. We have no relationship with our womb. We have a really really unfortunately discombobulated relationship with our menstrual cycle. So there's a lot to heal, but it's going to take too long to do it piecemeal. So the yoga really does a really comprehensive job of doing all these things all at once in a really powerful and precise way.
I love it. I actually did a teacher training for Kundalini years ago,
Mm,
and it's incredible. The breath work, you really feel an incredible sense of energy
yeah,
being awakened.
yeah.
And you also have moments of such challenge through it when you're going through it. There's such it really is so transforming.
Yes, yes. And that's why I choose this kind of yoga, because it literally heals at the psychic level as well. And so
Hmm.
if you don't have time to do a lot of healing work around this, know that you're healing physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychically, at every level of your body and being. In Kundalini Yoga, we talk about there's 10 different bodies, energetic bodies. And so it's a really amazing way to heal. And you don't even need to understand all of this. You just need to do the
Yeah.
practice. And all of
Yeah.
it's happening kind of in the background. So, yeah,
Definitely. And sometimes even with the breath work, you literally feel like just extra energy
yeah.
that is not needed is getting burnt off.
Exactly. Yeah, both ways, right? So the extra energy that's
Yeah.
not needing is getting burnt off. And then if you are
Mhm.
feeling like you don't have enough energy, you're bringing it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, can you speak about the connection of women's cycles with the moon?
Sure. So, I spoke about that briefly earlier when I was sharing my story. Um, Basically, one of the, coming back to, I want to link the yoga and the women's cycles piece. And we talked about breath work. So the breath work that I use in the Moon Goddess yoga program is very specific meditation to balance the menstrual cycle. And in that meditation to balance the menstrual cycle, we do a particular breath pattern where there's a breath. So it's a 4-part breath. There's a mudra, which means it's a hand position, and you're pressing each fingertip sequentially. And then there's a mantra that you're saying silently in your mind, which is a 4-sound mantra. So the reason why I want to bring this to light is this exact mantra represents the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle and the cycle of life, which is
Hmm.
represented by the menstrual cycle.
Right. Is it Satanama?
It is. Yes. Yeah. So sa meaning, the initiation, that spark.
Hmm.
Ta meaning life. So we go back, like the follicular phase is that spark.
Hmm.
Ta is ovulation. Na is when the egg does or does not get fertilized. And we're talking with the menstrual cycle without fertilization, it's a na.
Hmm.
It's the transition. And ma is rebirth. So,
Mm.
death, dissolution, rebirth. So,
Love it.
right. And so, but a lot of times we really shy away from the idea of death and dissolution, and then what we forget is rebirth comes from that.
Right.
And so part of, fertility, the fertility journey is sometimes there's a lot of grief and loss along the way.
Right.
There's a lot of heartache and disappointment.
Yeah.
And we don't process that.
Hmm.
And again, sometimes it's really important to go to therapy and process loss and grief.
Hmm.
And sometimes we don't have to go down that route. Now, as a psychotherapist myself, which is, as an adjunct to doing this work, I also do psychotherapy.
Hmm.
So I want to just say as a disclaimer, that doesn't mean that everyone can skip over that necessary grief work. But
Hmm.
some people that don't have a trauma history, that don't need to do, psychotherapy to heal from the years of infertility and, maybe several pregnancy losses. If that's not, and you don't have a trauma history, then maybe you don't need to do that kind of psychotherapeutic healing work. And the beauty of the Kundalini practice, when we're doing the energetic work at this level, we bypass the conscious mind. And so,
Hmm.
like I said, going back to the mantra, pressing the fingertips, doing the breathing, it's a special breath, and saying that mantra, you're addressing that cycle of life without even knowing it. You're doing
Right.
that work, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't need to consciously need to know exactly what's happening in the healing process. sometimes it's really necessary, but sometimes you don't need that in order to heal.
Right. I agree. Because in Chinese medicine, we do bypass a lot of that through working on the spirit and the energy meridians. And sometimes, as a matter of fact, when we get too much in our story, it can keep us there.
Yeah. So again, it really depends because, you know, I have a lot of trauma training. It really depends about trauma history.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's really necessary to do that work when you're stuck for a really long time and nothing is working. Go
Yeah.
and do psychotherapy.
Right.
But if that's not your story and you kind of know that, no, you can get through this faster because it's
Mm-hmm.
not really something that's deep, deep, deep that needs to be looked at from that perspective, then this is a really fast track way of doing that healing work. Very similar, like you said, to traditional Chinese medicine, because you're working simultaneously on several different levels that are not,
Yeah.
we don't need to engage conscious mind for that.
Right. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Very profound. And so you implement yoga, Kundalini yoga, meditations, and practice, and then you combine it with hatha to move through the process. And do you make it individualized for some clients?
I do. So going back to your question a few questions ago, I just want to kind of stitch it all together. So how does this process work? So the Moon Goddess Yoga program is a very specific practice. It's a specific program that I put together that allows women who want to do this work and they want to be the one kind of like taking the taking charge back, taking that ownership back of their redefining their relationship with their womb, with their menstrual cycles, kind of putting that empowerment back in their hands. Maybe they're going through IVF, maybe they're going through an FET, and they want to do something to really supercharge their connection to the divine feminine, to get their wombs really ready. Or maybe you're just trying to conceive naturally. Then the Moon Goddess program is a really good way to ideally give yourself 3 months, but even if you only have a month, it's beneficial. And it
Mm-hmm.
starts off with the first part of the practice that it's sort of guided step by step. Once you enroll in the program, you are given a very specific plan about how to go through the program. And it starts by identifying where you are in your cycle. And there are meditations, audio meditations. So they're like visualizations that I've created and recorded in my own voice, specific to allow women to connect where they are in their cycle with that particular goddess energy. So that's the first step of the program. And
Mm-hmm.
then I ask women to start charting their cycle with the moon. So it's very different than, the BBT kind of charting or the Justice method for fertility awareness management, which are two methods I love both. But this is
Mm-hmm.
different in that what you're tracking is your emotional self I do like to recommend charting physical symptoms. And also if someone is already doing BBT, then I suggest that you include that in your chart. But
Mm-hmm.
basically in your moon cycle chart, it gives you a snapshot in a month, like on one page, of where you're shifting from one energy to the next, to the next, to the next. And part of the
Right.
benefit of that is you get to identify where your energy shifts in the month, and that helps you identify your needs, your desires, what feels good and why, when, what doesn't feel good and why, when. It helps you communicate with your partner so that he can or she can meet your needs more readily. It helps you plan when you should and shouldn't, do your social stuff. It helps you understand when your fertility window is opening and when it's closing. It helps you understand your emotions when you're in the 2-week wait, and it helps you contain that space, and also work with your cycle in a way that feels really, like a partnership, not something to be medicated or something to be controlled, but as like a new relationship that you're creating with yourself. It's like a new communication tool with your body, that you're directly getting the information from your body. So that's the first part, that the introduction to Moon Goddess. And then there's 4 different videos that take you through the entire practice. And the practice starts with a Kundalini practice, because like in Chinese medicine, we want to increase blood flow and circulation to the uterus and the ovaries, and to really get, stagnation out and blood flow in. So the Hatha practice is really designed to help a woman actually start feeling that part of her body more. And as you know, the blood vessels that supply blood to the legs also supply the blood to the uterus. So there's a lot of movement in the pelvic region to promote that circulation. And then the Kundalini practice, like I mentioned earlier, is more targeting the endocrine system, the pituitary gland, the brain, the hypothalamus pituitarian axis, and to regulate, to really bring hormones into optimal balance. We've seen FSH decrease. We've actually seen some people have reported their AMH has increased. So all kinds of amazing things happen through this practice. And of course, we have a lot of pregnancy success stories and birth stories that we share as well. So the yoga, so the yoga practice, and then the meditation, the breath work meditation practice is the final thing in the yoga practice itself. And then I do add one more element to the program, which is an additional, additional resource. It's a program, a different standalone program that I've now included in Moon Goddess, called Sensual Magic. And Sensual Magic, the program itself, is designed to help a woman and her partner kind of change the relationship of how they might be approaching sex and baby making, and really bring back the joy in that sexual intimacy. So how do you, how do you engage with your goddess energies so that you can start relating sexually and intimately with your partner in a way that doesn't reduce you to 2, organisms that are trying to just get their body parts together to make a baby, but rather, you're really fostering intimacy, connection, pleasure, that sense of love, which is ideally where you want to conceive a child from. So, so that's the last part of the program that I have now included, because that I found through, my private coaching work was really beneficial to. I would always include that piece in my private coaching work in addition to Moon Goddess. And I thought, okay, since we expanded the program from what used to be a 5-week to now a 12-week guided program. So every week you get an email, a check-in, and also guidance on what you should be doing this week. There's practice schedules that we recommend, so minimum, medium, or maximum practice schedule. So you might only have 15 minutes one week, or in a day, and sometimes you might have an hour. So how do you decide what to do? So we have practice schedules outlined, and you can decide what works for you in your schedule. And then sort of the additional work, if you want to do that deeper dive into how can you change your relationship with your partner so you recapture that intimacy, rekindle that intimacy and connection again, then the Sensual Magic program is there to do that especially if you're trying to conceive naturally, that
Mm-hmm.
becomes really important to get that spark back and to feel good again about having sex, and not just having sex during ovulation, but having sex all the time like you used to.
Right. It's an important step.
Yeah.
And a lot of different things happen in the body as far as hormones
Yeah.
to prepare the body for conception. So if we skip that step and make it mechanical, I really think it's a mistake. It's something that really needs to be considered.
Well, I have a funny story about that. Can I share it with you?
Do
Yeah.
tell. Yeah.
So I had a friend, so this was not a client, but I had a friend who was um, having her eggs harvested. And so she was, freezing her eggs. And so she
Mhm.
was doing her injections, and she went into the ultrasound, and they're like, "Oh, we don't know what's happening." She was like only 36 at the time. She's like, "You should be responding better to the medication." So, I can't remember what they did with her protocol because we weren't in that kind of relationship that she should tell me that information. But basically, what happened
Mhm.
is we went out that weekend, ended up having a very intense sexual rendezvous with someone, and they were, busy all weekend. She goes back on Monday, and they're like, "Oh my God, what did you do? The follicles are like really good today."
Wow.
Yeah. So that story always stayed with me because I think, to your point, when we are forgetting that our bodies are actually designed to do this.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so if you're there's a message being sent, right?
Mhm.
Produce cervical mucus. Get
Absolutely.
ready. This is going to happen, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
produce follicles, right? Like,
Yes.
we need the hormones in the body need to be stimulated by actual behavior that would warrant that stimulation, which is, right,
Absolutely.
sexual activity
Yeah.
warrants that
And,
stimulation.
think about it. It's just that you're combining the yin and the yang. There's an alchemy there.
Yes.
The female, the male energy, there's something there that sparks a magnet. There's a magnetism,
Yes.
and it transforms. And, it would be crazy not to use that energy.
Yeah.
you know?
Right. And to your point, like, that's another piece, really important piece, the masculine and the feminine, that I go into really deeply in sensual magic, is that so much of the, of our world now, like, as women, a really powerful aftermath of the feminist movement was that, we took that stance of, we need to be just as good as men,
Hmm.
and kind of cut ourselves off from the feminist, what makes not feminist, what makes a woman feminine.
Hmm.
And so many women are masterful in the masculine energy and quite
Yeah.
clueless in the feminine energy.
Right. And what is that telling ourselves? If
Yeah.
we can't take our power and be proud of how we are and our innate nature and say that's powerful,
Yes.
or do we have to become like you to become powerful?
Exactly. Exactly. So much of this reclaiming menstrual wisdom and power is reclaiming the feminine right in the
Yeah,
body.
that's
And
right.
then the mindset shifts that I work on in sensual magic is, how do you show up as a fully feminine being, embodying all the four aspects of your goddess energies, and be powerful, be feminine, be powerful at
Hmm.
work, be powerful in your relationship, be powerful in all aspects of your life, showing up as a female energy being, not as someone masked, like a female being masked in masculine energy. No, that's not powerful.
Right, right. It's not genuine.
No, it's not authentic at all. And it masks your actual real power.
Right. It's true. It's
Mhm.
true. I love that. That really it is it's a whole perception, and I think we subconsciously began doing that as a culture in order to prove ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that we're much better off showing that power in its purest form and what it's meant to be.
Yeah. And it's, it was maybe a necessary evolution. That was not something maybe that we could skip over what happened.
Hmm.
And so it's now brought us to where we are today. And I can't,
Yeah, but maybe
yes,
rethink it.
yeah, exactly. Right. So I can't remember who said this, but there's a quote that I read that I really liked is like, now we've earned our spot in the boardroom. Like, we're here.
Hmm.
So now show up fully because you're already there now. Stop. You don't have to
Yeah,
pretend to be something else to get there. We're already here. Now show up
yeah,
fully in your power as a woman. And you're a
right.
cyclical being. You have a uterus, you have a menstrual cycle, you do bleed every month, you have hormones that change every week. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's powerful, and learn how to use
Hmm.
that power.
Yes, definitely. I love that. That
Mm.
is a great point. Is there a tip that you can share for the listeners to implement?
Yeah, I think a really, like, something small that I feel um, can be really beneficial is, when you see the full moon in the sky, take a moment and sort of realize that you are part of a timeless, universal cycle that has literally existed since the beginning of time. And it's
Oh, I love that.
right, and it's reflected every every month in your body. And you're connected to, like, the first woman that ever existed. Like, our wombs are,
Mm,
we all go back to that first woman.
yeah.
And so you're not alone. We're all connected. All of our wombs are energetically tied together, which is kind of like crazy. And
Yeah.
all the healing work that you do for yourself, I think, like, I literally believe that it goes back in your own lineage, it goes forward in your lineage. Every womb that is being reclaimed as a source of power and not as a source of brokenness
Hmm.
is a service to everyone, and like the whole planet benefits.
Yeah.
And when you bleed, when you have your period, think about what you're releasing, because it's your opportunity. Yes, you can be grieving. Yes, you can be sad that you didn't get pregnant. And you can also use it as an opportunity to let go. Like, what do you need to let go of in your life? What it could be, a belief, it could be, um, an idea that you've been carrying around, something outdated. So you have an opportunity through your cycle to connect to something powerful. When you see the moon, feel yourself connected to that timeless, universal power and pattern that's the creation of life. And when you have your period, use an opportunity for cleansing for your own soul, your own
Hmm.
spirit, your own psyche. And see if you can let go of whatever idea or belief might be subconsciously in your way of conceiving.
It's interesting. I actually enjoy getting my period. And I
Mm,
did before I even learned about this. It just there's this release.
yeah.
And sometimes I almost right before I get my period, I'm like, I just want it to come already. Like
Yeah.
it's like yearning of just come. But then
Yeah.
once I feel so clear, like I just feel like I'm able to let go. And it's this incredible feeling. And there was a question that I had for you, I forgot, but I'm going to ask now,
Okay.
is that I've heard through the Chinese medicine perspective, and also as a patient before I went and studied it,
Mm-hmm.
that your cycle obviously goes with the moon. This I've noticed before
Mm-hmm.
I even heard about it. I've just noticed that I always used to get my period on the full moon. And this one practitioner told me that ideally you get your period on the new moon and ovulate on the full moon, but sometimes they can switch back and forth.
Yeah.
And I was curious to see what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so that's a really popular question in my
Yes,
world.
I'm sure. Yes.
So, in fact, it's the most popular blog post that people find me through. You
Hmm.
know, does your period need to land on the, basically, is your period out of sync with nature if it's coming on the full moon?
Hmm.
And the answer is it depends. So, I don't believe, first of all, you can, of course, get pregnant on a red moon cycle. So, that's what it's called. When
Hmm.
you are getting your period with the full moon, it's called a red moon cycle. When you're getting
Hmm.
your period with the new moon, it's called a white moon cycle. So
Hmm.
traditionally in Chinese medicine and in Ayurveda, um, the notion is women are more fertile when they are following the fertility cycle of the earth. So what does that mean? It means at the full moon, the earth itself, like if you plant by the lunar cycle, then the
Hmm.
earth is most fertile under the full moon. So
Hmm.
in Europe, they actually have biodynamic farming. You can go to the store and buy labeled, produce, biodynamic produce. What does that mean? It was planted and harvested by the full moon. And
Mm.
so it's considered to be more, there's some energetic quality about it because it's in the rhythm of the moon's fertility, the earth's fertility, sorry. And so
Mhm.
women were thought to be traditionally more fertile if they followed that cycle. Women who follow the red moon cycle were considered kind of like misfits. Uh, they were the medicine women. They were the midwives. They were the women who tended to the pleasures of men, um, the seductresses. They were not the good women at home having babies. Did they still get pregnant? Of course they did. So
Mhm.
traditionally, that was the distinction between the two cycles. And one was considered positive and one was considered evil. And it was
Mm.
the evil woman who had the red moon cycle. So now when we update that in our a modern, like from a modern perspective, like now, what I see is the red moon women, and most of my community, like 80% of my community is made up of red moon women.
Mhm.
These are healers, these are change makers and magic makers, and these are the women who are essentially awakening to their own power, um, to their own voice. It's a different, how do I say? It's a different quality of being in a red moon cycle. Is very much the cycle of the powerful healer medicine woman archetype.
Mhm.
And so a lot of women who find me and my work it's because they're bleeding with the full moon. And
Right.
so many of them do conceive. And the funny thing is, we found, and they actually, weirdly enough, did a study in India about this, that,
Really?
yeah, you're more apt to conceive a baby girl if you're on a red
Mhm.
moon cycle.
I have two girls.
Yeah.
And I'm a healer, or at least I
Yeah.
want to be.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
and the crazy thing, Michelle, is everyone that I've worked with one on one, if they're on a
Mhm.
white moon cycle, they had a boy. If they're on a red moon cycle, they had a girl.
That's crazy.
Isn't it?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
Yeah. It's really weird.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah. It's really super cool. Hmm.
Awesome. I love this topic. I love the mysticism. I love the fact that these are things that happen every single day, and everybody looks at it. Everybody sees the moon. They know the moon's there. But to know that there's something deeper there, and there is a communication and a connection, and just even talking about this topic and listening to you speak, it brings an element of magic
Yeah.
and mysticism to life. And I think that that's what we've lost in general. And I think that we're getting back there. I think our souls are yearning and thirsty for this
Yeah.
because there is so much more to life than just the mundane.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's, the magic and the mystery of the feminine, right? Like
Yeah.
medical science is barely touching, they barely understand yet how any of
Hmm.
this really works. There's so many unknowns. Half the time, doctors, especially in fertility, are taking complete guesses. They don't know
Hmm.
why some things work sometimes and sometimes the same thing doesn't work at all. They literally have no answers. They don't know why miscarriages happen. It's every day, like there's more questions than there are answers. PGS can only take us so far. Still
Hmm.
doesn't guarantee anything. Uterine biopsies can only take us so far. So yes, we have this amazing technology, but it's still like, Russian roulette. You have a very, like in terms of statistics, a very little chance for a lot of money to spend for conception and pregnancy to happen. So how do you
Yeah.
increase those odds? You use the power and the magic of the feminine, your womb, and the
Mm.
menstrual cycle. And boy, do your odds go up incredibly. With my clients, I see an increase of 50% success rate when you do this in conjunction with whatever else you're doing now.
I just had a visual of, when we talk about science and people get very hung up on studies,
Hmm.
especially even now, it's almost like women trying to be like men, even with Eastern medicine
Yeah,
now. People get hung up on studies so that they can keep up with the Western medicine and be taken
yeah.
seriously. And you look at like studies and research, it's almost like, how do you get to know an animal? I'm using that as an
Mhm.
example of like getting to know the body. How do you get to know an animal? You could take that animal and dissect it, or you can hang out with that animal and play with it,
Yeah,
and connect with it and really feel what it's trying to tell you and communicate with it. There's a difference. When you dissect it, you don't really experience it, and you take away an element which in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda is so it's such a large element of health and wellness, which is the spirit.
yeah,
The spirit is not accounted for in science
yeah.
so far. Maybe they're starting to understand a little bit with quantum physics and consciousness, but it's not an element that's even considered at this time for the most part.
Right. And what is conception if not spirit?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, really, it seems like it should be so obvious.
Right? So even
Yeah.
in the lab, right? Like that embryologist, he is definitely, and I'm saying he because I only know male embryologists, but I'm sure there's females too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that person is, you know, the gateway almost to once that embryo gets made, what is that tipping point? But spirit has to come in
Right.
order for us to actually have a baby.
Mhm.
So without that part, if you don't know how to work with spirit and energy, you're relying on biology only.
Mhm.
That's really not, I don't even know, like that's at least only half the picture,
Yeah, exactly. Not even,
right?
quantum
We
physics is
don't
saying
know.
that's
Right.
actually 1% and
Okay.
99 is energy.
Right.
And things that seem to
Right.
be physical are not even really physical. It's all energy.
Right. Right.
But we're learning that. But
Right.
there's a lot of resistance to that. But it is what it
Right.
is. It's already being shown. It's already being proven. So when people say they're skeptics, are they skeptic or are they biased? Because the evidence is showing up.
Well, I think you made a really good point earlier when you said, Michelle, that, oh, what did you say? It was so good. Um, like that relationship, if you dissect, what you're doing is you're cutting yourself off from the relational,
Mm.
right? It becomes clinical.
Yeah.
It becomes
Lifeless.
cold. Yeah, lifeless. And that, like, if you think about who succeeds in your practice and who doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
it's the people who stop relying only on what makes sense, for me anyways, in my practice,
Mm.
that when they turn that corner and feel the power for themselves, and and I'm talking about like marine biologists, I have lawyers, I
Mm-hmm.
have, accountants, like talking about women who are very successful in their careers, lawyers, like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
um, and they, as soon as they turn that corner into suspending like what needs to be rational and scientific into connecting into energy and the potential for life, like those are the women who have success with my work.
Yeah. And
um,
the one word that comes to my mind is faith.
yeah,
Having faith in the process, trusting, allowing.
yeah,
What does the egg do? The egg allows the sperm to come
exactly,
in.
yeah.
Trust in the process
And
is so important.
yeah, and it's like goes back to the masculine and the feminine, right? So the feminine receives the masculine. The
Hmm.
feminine receives the attachment of the embryo in the uterus. The feminine receives the soul of the baby. Like the feminine receives. The feminine doesn't force and try and demand and like pursue. The feminine receives.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great note to end with. We're definitely gotten over time, but I could talk to you for another hour. So maybe I'll have you come back and we'll just talk about another subject. But
Great.
I love this kind of conversation. It makes me feel like I get into a consciousness that's more majestic. And I love it. I love it. It really awakens and evokes an energy. And I do feel that with certain topics, you do evoke certain energies.
Yeah.
And I think that it's probably going to inspire a lot of people. It's definitely something that I also just kind of want to point out is a lot of times people will come into my office and women, after going through many tests and studies, tests and labs, and they say every single time they go, they come back feeling defeated,
Mhm.
lifeless. And it just goes to show, we have to address that energy, the feminine, the divine mysticism, something that we already have in us. It's waiting to be awakened.
Yes, I love that. It is waiting to be awakened.
Awesome. So how can people find you?
Right. So I'm in Canada, so my website is yogagoddess.ca. And from there you can visit the Work With Me page to learn about all my products and services. Moon Goddess is amongst them. Um, and if you want to work with me one-on-one, coaching is an option as well. There's many different ways for us to work together. So the best way is to visit the website.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure for me. You definitely speak my language, and I really, really enjoyed having you on and having this conversation.
It is such a
So thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to leave a review. Reviews are everything to podcasters. You can find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com. And please be on the lookout for my online course and program, This course has emerged from everything that I've been using for the fertility program I now offer at my office. I wanted to consolidate all of my suggestions and coaching and put it into a form that anyone can purchase and use. It was important for me to encompass key fertility health factors as well as guide you on implementing changes in your routine that are shown to boost fertility while being realistic and user-friendly. I will be offering this course with and without coaching. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com, where you can find the subscription form. I thank you so much for listening in and hope you have a beautiful day.